Alright, so coming at you with another knife video. With this video, obviously you can see we have the Lionsteel knives here, SR1 and SR2. And I wanted to do two things. First and foremost was kind of do a comparison between these two and also do a follow-up on the SR2 as I've had it for a while now. First and foremost, someone had asked me in my last video, they'd asked in the comments if the knife flips well. And it does flip quite well now. Initially you have a break-in period, and unfortunately as to why they're really stiff out of the box, or a reason they might be, is these knives are actually assembled with grease in the pivots, and the reason is that they have to take the blade and they have to take the two Teflon washers and they have to try to jam them into this mono frame here. And when you have a screw construction, it's pretty easy to assemble the knife and the washers because you just put one side down, put the blade on, the other side down, screws in, no problem. But with a mono frame or a single piece frame, you have to try to squeeze this in here, and there's just barely enough room. And so by putting grease on there, it actually causes the Teflon washers to adhere to the blade just enough so you can squeeze the thing in and assemble the knife correctly. So when I got this one, I actually took it apart, cleaned out all the grease, and then I put some CLP in there, which is just kind of my preferred protectant slash lubricant, and it was a huge pain in the ass to try to get back together. I seriously spent well over an hour, so I understand why they use the grease now, and why there is a break-in period, because the grease just isn't as slippery as your standard lubricant. So without further ado, close position, flicks open nicely. Let's do that one more time. No problem. Let's look at the larger one. This one actually got off the forums. It came to me with a pretty scratched blade, which is why it came in on the cheap. Typically you have this really nice, well, there's fingerprints all over it, but it has a really smooth, really high finish grind. It's a satin. It's definitely a very fine satin, almost heading into polish. I sent it off to my favorite knife modifier, and he gave it a standard belt treatment, but I think it looks nice. I kind of like the grind lines in here. It mirrors the handles a little bit and those milling lines. So anyways, flipping this one, no problem there. Obviously it's not as fast because there's a lot more steel in this blade, but it opens just fine. Yeah, there we go. So both knives flip open nicely. This one flips open quite nicely, especially after I got the grease out of there and I just threw some CLP in the pivot. It became quite smooth. So there you have it. That's how it flips open after the initial break-in period. If you use it and you just spray some CLP in there without taking it apart, and then blast it out with an air compressor, you can probably over time get a lot of that grease out of there and replace it with your standard lubricant that you prefer. So I would go that route and I would not try to take them apart and clean them, because again, huge pain in the ass. You're gonna get very frustrated unless, if you work on watches for fun, knock yourself out. If you're like most of us and you don't, then I wouldn't bother. Anyhow, couple things that I want to touch on that I really like. First, let's take a look. I've pocketed this one quite a bit, so you can see scratches all over the clip, which I'm just fine with. I mean, I bought it to be carried. There are a few scratches on the titanium that we might be able to find in here, but they're very light. Oh, there's one right there. There's a scratch, and yeah, there are a few scratches on here, but anyways, it's held up pretty well. Still looks very good, and I don't really mind if you get scratches. I mean, I bought it to use it. But a couple things I want to touch on. Let's put these two next to each other. Here's the difference in the size between the two. We can go butt to butt. But specs, I guess we can talk about those. Again, blade length on the SR1, the big boy, is 3.7. On the smaller one here, we have 3 1/4. The handle length on the SR1 is 4.6. On the SR2 is just 4 inches. Total length is 8.3 inches. Total length here is 7 1/4 inches. Weight, this is the big difference, 6.8 ounces here, and this one is 4.8 ounces. So you have a 2-ounce difference between the two. Yeah, I guess it's noticeable. The nice thing, even though these are heavier knives because they're made of full titanium, is that the slim profile allows them to carry quite well in combination with the pocket clip. Since it is deep carry and the knife does have a little heft to it, it stays in your pocket nicely and it's nice and secure. But the slim profile honestly allows these to go in the pocket very nicely. And for me, with all of my knives, the thinness or the slimness is the most important factor in comfort, just like with you know, your concealed carry weapon if you carry one of those. So I will say though, one thing that I do dislike is the convex grind on these knives. I might reprofile them at some point to a standard V grind. It's just, I'm not extremely proficient at the convex grind sharpening, and so when I sharpen this one, I got a little bit of an uneven bevel between the two sides here, and that's just something that drives me nuts. I don't mind scratches on the handle, but uneven grinds really drive me nuts. Anyhow, this one, even though I carry this one, the matte titanium color actually hides wear extremely well. I can't find any real scratch marks on this knife, even though I carry it quite a bit. So another thing that comes to mind is the Rotoblock between these two. I mean, the Rotoblock, a lot of people say it's kind of gimmicky because the concept is you tighten this down, you spin it, tighten it down, and it locks the knife in an open position. But with the frame lock of this quality, with, again, stainless steel insert, which I love, I can't imagine a situation where it's not strong enough just in the normal open position without the Rotolock, you know, tuned in or tightened down. So it is gimmicky, but the way that I look at it is this is the coolest over travel stop that's out there. I mean, you look at ones on Hinders, you look at ones on the zero tolerance models, you look at ones on the Chris Reeve knives. I mean, none of them look as cool as the Rotoblock. I mean, without question, this is the coolest over travel stop on any knife, anywhere currently. I mean, look at all the fine detail in that. I mean, it just looks really cool. The other thing too is this one, it actually won't move because I moved it to the open position, held it down, took my Torx bit, and I just cranked it down all the way so that way it doesn't accidentally engage. Not that I've ever had the problem, but just like unnecessary safeties on guns, I do not want them engaging when I do not need them. So hardware is, I think the hardware is really cool. It has a semi, you know, custom look to it. I mean, again, the Rotoblock, all this here, I mean, it blends well. The presentation of all this stainless steel against the, you know, the blue is fantastic, ties in well with the handle. Even on this one, I mean, it's a brushed or almost polished stainless steel against the matte titanium. Again, it offers just very nice detail work throughout the knife. So even on the matte one, it's enough to make it pop and just look really good. Another thing that I really like, these pocket clips, again, deep carry, so they can be a little bit harder to extract out of your pocket, but it doesn't interfere with the lock interface. One of my big issues, like with my Chris Reeve StarTac, is the pocket clip comes across the lock interface, and a lot of times I'll use, not on these so much, but on other knives, I'll use the pocket clip as a traction point. But since these pocket clips are so small, you don't actually use, I don't use them as a traction point. Let me double check with the smaller one. But it doesn't touch the lock interface, which I really appreciate. And that allows for easy opening and closing. This one, ooh, it touches it a little bit, but it doesn't interfere with the lock interface. It's not long enough. It doesn't come close enough to the contact point. So anyhow, so these are some size comparisons. Again, two beautiful knives. I think that the Lionsteel offerings are actually some of the most attractive production knives out there. I mean, just the way that they feel in hand, it's truly remarkable. I mean, just the feel of this nicely contoured titanium with the finish on it. It feels good in the hand. It looks good. I mean, the funny thing is, so this one I got used. I didn't quite pay half the price, but a little more than half the price. And my Chris Reeves StarTac, I bought brand new full retail, but when I have non-knife people check them both out, they both comment that this knife just feels remarkable. It feels like something high quality. They're like, wow, this must be really expensive. And little do they know, my Chris Reeves StarTac was about twice the price with what I paid, but by the same merit, this brand new is still a little less expensive, but they still don't, to them, this one feels expensive. It feels very nice. So that's something to keep in mind if you've never had these in hand, is just the quality is there. And I'm a little biased towards Italian makers. I did spend 1.5 years in Italy, so things that come out of Italy I'm always interested in. Now that I look at it, these pocket clips are actually a little bit different. The SR2 pocket clip is a tiny bit longer than the SR1. Interesting. I didn't catch that before until just now looking at them. But yeah, there's actually a different shape. You can see there's a different shape, and then there's a different length to them. Both good pocket clips. I generally do like these longer ones though, as it gives you better contact on your pockets. So these work really well in jeans. With slacks, the weight is the predominant factor, because if the slacks don't have reinforced pockets per se, so they'll pull down the pocket, and yeah. So other than that, they carry well. All their new models have Sleipner. Even the new SR2 aluminums now come with Sleipner. I don't think they're using D2 on these models anymore. Some of the older aluminum SR1s do have D2, but I believe all the new offerings are in Sleipner. Now, if you're a Lionsteel fan and you haven't heard, they do have a couple new models coming out. The tie spine in aluminum was demonstrated at SHOT Show this last month, and so Johnny said that we should see models of those soon, which would be really cool. It's probably going to have a stainless steel lock interface. Obviously, aluminum can't take the same abuse that the titanium tie spine can, so that'll be really cool. I do prefer the stainless steel lock interfaces. They do have the TM1s, which debuted, and those are IKBS lockback knives with micarta and G10 handles, and in typical Lionsteel house brand fashion, they are monoblock construction, so they should be quite strong even in the micarta and the carbon fiber configurations. This is the first lockback I've seen with IKBS, so Google those if you haven't seen them yet. Really interesting. They do use the thumb discs. They don't have thumb studs, and Johnny and Moletta have promised, or at least talked about, a Lionsteel flipper coming later this year. So we can only hope that we're going to see the titanium mono construction with a flipper tab. Hopefully it'll be a little bit slimmer. I don't know how well this would, this might flip okay. I don't know. We'll see what they come up with, but I'm really, really excited for that. I'm also currently looking for a Damascus version of the SR1 because I'm quite taken with them at the moment. A little obsessed. But let's throw some other knives in here for size comparisons. SR1, SR2, Tenacious, just because it's so common. I think everyone's had one or got one. And then here's a mini grip, carbon fiber, custom scales. There it is next to the SR2. So there's a shot of just the different sizes that you have going there. So that's pretty much everything. Again, fantastic knives. Hopefully you can try one in hand if you don't own one or don't want to plan on buying one. In terms of aluminum versus titanium, whatever fits in your budget. I prefer the way that titanium feels, and I've always kind of gone with the approach of no regret buying. So lower end versus higher end in the same, be it guns, be it knives. I'll typically go with the more premium version if it's realistic for me financially. That way I can't be like, well, I like this, but maybe I'd like it more in the more expensive configuration. So just go balls deep right off the bat. So anyways, check out the new offerings. We'll look forward to potential flippers. We'll look forward to aluminum tie spy from Moletta and Gianni at Lionsteel. And if you have any comments or questions, put them below. Video went longer than I anticipated, but that'll do it. Have a good night.